Hello aspirants, looking at editorials and question bank for 2nd Feb. So today the Hindu editorial, there's only one, is a complete editorial on the budget 2017-18. So some of the major provisions which it talks of, first of all, is the tax rate for medium and small enterprises. So for these enterprises with an annual turnover up to rupees 50 crore. For these enterprises, the corporate tax rate has been brought down to 25%. So corporate tax rate actually is 30%, but they would have to pay a 25% tax rate. So this is a concession given here. Then with respect to personal income tax, here the lowest tax slab, 2.5 lakh to 5 lakh. For them, the income tax rate, which was 10%, has now brought down to 5%. So these are the concessions given for the people who have been most affected by demonetization. Plus also this lowering of the taxation rate here is an initiative to incentivize or bring in more people into the taxation net. So tax compliance would increase if taxation rates are low. So that is the idea with which this has been proposed. So this is the two major taxation rate provisions in the present budget. Then also as compensating for this loss which has been made because of taxation rate reduced in the personal income tax slab, the government has introduced a surcharge, 10% surcharge on income tax of those in the 50 lakh to 1 crore slab. So earlier there was no surcharge here. Surcharge is there and will continue. That is there for the slab of more than rupees 1 crore income, annual income. So for them a 15% surcharge. So surcharge is an additional charge on the income tax paid. So this surcharge would continue, plus this surcharge of 10% has been introduced in this tax slab too. So this is the development. Then another provision is cash transactions of more than rupees 10 lakh cannot be made. So a complete bar on it. A penalty would be imposed as high as even 100% penalty. So if you have cash transaction of more than 3 lakh, then as much as the cash transaction has been done, that much amount of penalty would have to be paid as well. So this has become illegal now. Then there is a nudge to businesses. Businesses cannot make payments over 10,000 cash by cash. They have to do it digitally. Otherwise, in your income tax calculations, this will not be taken into consideration as profit in the, or as a payment done in the business transactions. So they have to do this digitally. So this is also a nudge to the businesses to go digital for higher values. Like this is up to rupees 10,000. It is fine in cash. Otherwise, it should be digital. Then even another provision is infrastructure status has been given to affordable housing. So this will help them in getting the tax benefits which are available as such for infrastructure developments. So this is also a benefit. Then even home loans, rescheduling of home loans, that may also take place, or provision has been made for that. Even higher allocation for National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, MGNREGA, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, irrigation projects, infrastructure projects have been done. Then with respect to cash donations for political parties. So cash donations from one individual to a political party cannot exceed 2,000 rupees. Earlier this cap was of rupees 20,000. Means more than 20,000, if a donation is being made by a person or by any entity, then the source has to be named. From unknown sources up to 20,000, it can be from unknown sources. So generally cash transactions, it is possible to have it done without knowing the source if specifically not demanded. And political parties have no incentive to demand and to mention the source for cash donations which have been made. But up to rupees 2,000 cash donations can be made. Beyond that, if the political party is making, if anybody is making a donation to political party, then it has to be not in cash mode, through a digital transaction, through a check or any other mode of payment. So this has been made mandatory. So this will bring in the regulation on the donations coming to various political parties. Plus also the 2,000 rupees cash, maximum cash transaction is one way, and also it is planning to bring in a concept of electoral bonds. So complete scheme on this will be put forth by the government soon. So it has mentioned it in the budget that an electoral bonds would be issued. So people can buy these electoral bonds, and these electoral bonds can be given to various political parties as donations, because people may want to keep their identity secret. But then the payments cannot be done in cash beyond this 2,000. So if you want to do a digital payment and you do it directly to the political party, then your identity is revealed. So if you don't want your identity to be revealed, then you can do it through electoral bonds. So electoral bonds are paid, and electoral bonds will be issued by banks notified for that purpose, and they will have to be paid for only digitally through this transaction. Cash transactions would not be allowed for buying electoral bonds. So this is how it allows not disclosing the source of the donator to the political parties too, and donations can come forth to political parties. So this has been proposed. Then with respect to railways, since this is the first budget in which the general and railway budget have been merged, for this the Rashtriya Rail Sanraksha Kosh, which even the railway ministry had urged that the finance ministry should make provision for this. This has been proposed by the Anil Kakodkar committee, which had been set up on rail safety. So this will be provided for with rupees 1 lakh crore, as had been suggested by Anil Kakodkar too. So 1 lakh crore for over 5-year period is required to bring in various upgradation of the rail infrastructure as suggested by Anil Kakodkar Committee on Rail Safety. So what was being suggested is that advanced signaling systems have to be acquired for the train control as used in European countries. Then another one was regarding elimination of level crossings. All manned, unmanned level crossings have to be eliminated for smooth operations of the railways. Then replacement of carriages. The old integral coach factory ICF coaches have to be replaced by the modern, better engineered LHB coaches. So this is Link Hoffman Busch coaches, which are German designed and are much better than the ICF coaches, which are manufactured. So LHB coaches have also been inducted, but they have not been put into effect throughout. So that complete replacement is required, which itself would cost around 10,000 crores. So 1 lakh crore provided has to be used for this purpose. So in a phased manner, in 5 years, rail safety can be enhanced by all these reforms. So this is there. LHB coaches we have discussed quite often. This is regarding the taxation slabs. So we saw 5% taxation slab which has been brought in. So that is there. So senior and very senior citizens, there are further exemptions in the tax rate. So in that way it is shown. The LHB coaches which we have to see is the benefits which they have are discussed quite often. Looking at it once again, they have anti-telescopic properties. So anti-telescopic property means they will not flip and turn turtle. Means ulta nahi ho jayegi. When they retain themselves in that position. ICF coaches we see when they derail, they turn turtle. So that results in much more disaster and damages. Then they are made of stainless steel. So they have better shock absorbing capacity too. So that is there. Then disc brake system is used rather than thread brake system of ICF coaches. So this allows shorter stopping duration. So they can stop easily on braking. So that is also a benefit. The coupling system between the two coaches, the coaches being coupled. This coupling system in LHB coaches also reduces the relative motion. So the two coaches, they will not rise one above the other. So that kind of damage would also not be caused if LHB coaches and this coupling system is used. Then another one is finally that LHB coaches have a shorter wheelbase. So this helps them to negotiate sharp curves at higher speed easily without having the risk of a disaster or derailment taking place. So that is why LHB coaches have to be completely brought in the country. So this will be done with the help of this Rashtriya Rail Sanrakshan Kosh. Kosh means fund. So that is there. Then passenger tariffs. About passenger tariffs, it says that they have to be calculated taking into account the costs, social obligation too, and competition from other modes of transport. So that has to be rationalized as well. Then finally, it also makes a case for abolition of distinction between plan and non-plan expenditure. So this has been eliminated because anyway, Planning Commission has also been replaced by Niti Aayog. So plan, non-plan expenditure, basically the distinction was non-plan means which is not to be planned, which will be an expenditure anyway, like salaries to government employees, interest rates which have to be paid, subsidies which are being paid. So all these are expenditures which anyway would take place annually. So they are not planned. So these are non-plan expenditures. And plan expenditures are on some plan, scheme, program which has been initiated and planned and expenditure is being done. So presently the government says that this plan, non-plan expenditure distinction should not continue anymore and has to be abolished. So this has been the major provisions which this editorial discusses regarding the budget. The further detailed budget discussion we will do in the question bank section. So in the Hindu newspaper today, the lead article and all 3 other articles on the op-ed page are all on budget. The editorial is also on budget. The complete paper is on budget today. So I have merged the content of all these 4 lead page and op-ed page articles and put forth the content in a single item. So this will discuss what has been discussed in this. So it says the budget was presented with the philosophy of the government being said to transform, energize and clean India. So this is the agenda, philosophy of the government. The GDP growth estimates for 2017-18 have been nominal GDP growth, it says, would be 11.75%. So according to Economic Survey 2, the real GDP growth would be around 6.75 to 7.25%. So what is nominal and real? This we have discussed yesterday too. Repeating it here once again. Nominal GDP is GDP without taking into consideration inflation. And when inflation is taken into consideration, it is called real GDP. So this is at constant prices, real GDP. Nominal GDP is at current prices. Although also the budget has been praised as being in the Pareto optimal state. So Pareto optimality means there will be benefit for some and nobody would be hurt. So the maximum to which extent to which allocation of resources can be done, that benefit can be accrued to some and nobody would be hurt in the process. So if you go beyond Pareto optimality, then there is a possibility that some may be hurt. So that is what the budget is trying to achieve. So this is the appreciation done for the budget. The allocation for capital spending has increased. So there will be 25% increase in capital spending. So that is also a substantial increase, plus increase in transfer of to states also. Cooperative federalism has been promoted by the present government so far. So that has also been increased, transfer to states. Also it says there's a need to stimulate the economy and cultivate a more healthy federal relationship. So that is why these steps are being taken. A limit to cash donations to political parties is highlighted, that we already saw. So it was earlier 20,000, now it will be 2,000. So these are some of the major aspects highlighted. Then with respect to plan and non-plan expenditure abolition, so this distinction needs to be abolished too, had been recommended in 2013 by an expert committee on efficient management of public expenditure. So it says this results in distortion in allocation of resources. So it makes a distinction with maintenance of existing assets and creation of new assets. So if plan, non-plan expenditure distinction is abolished, then there will be a more efficient allocation of resources. That is believed. Then regarding fiscal consolidation, means reducing fiscal deficit and eliminating the revenue deficit. That was what the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act of 2013 aimed to achieve but could not achieve because of the global financial crisis in 2008-9. So those goals were not achieved. Fresh FRBM regulations are required. For that, a committee had been set up and that panel has submitted its report. So that is the NK Singh panel, which will talk of how FRBM regulations can be remodified and put forth as a timeline. There have been suggestions. Finance Minister had earlier suggested that FRBM Act, under this the fiscal deficit target should not be a particular value but should be a range. So the government should try to keep fiscal deficit within this range rather than keeping it at a particular value. So that was suggested too, and presently the fiscal deficit target for last year has already been achieved. For 2016-17 it was 3.5% fiscal deficit target, which has been achieved. So fiscal deficit basically means the borrowing requirements of the government. So government borrowings which are being done for fulfilling the deficit is called, means there are two sides, receipts and expenditure. So there are revenue receipts and capital receipts. Revenue are current receipts and capital are long-term receipts, like coming out of disinvestment or sale of major assets or something. So these revenue and capital receipts are receipt sides, and expenditure is revenue and capital. So revenue expenditure is current, present expenditure for various requirements like these salaries, subsidies, whatever have to be paid. So those are revenue expenditure, and capital expenditure are large scale expenditures like on infrastructure which have long gestation periods. So some such provisions which have to be made. So those are called capital expenditures. So we talk of two types of deficit, revenue deficit and fiscal deficit. So revenue deficit is mainly between expenditure and receipts of revenue. So if revenue expenditure is more than revenue receipts, means there is a revenue deficit. And revenue deficit, if it's there, then you have to borrow. So when you're borrowing for revenue deficit, it means you're borrowing for consuming presently. So revenue deficit is not desired. The target of FRBM Act of 2013 was also to bring revenue deficit down to zero. So this will still prevail. Fiscal deficit is required. Fiscal deficit to some extent is essential for the economy's buoyancy, means economy to function. That is like inflation, as we say, inflation to some extent is required. So government borrowings to some extent are also required, but then they should be used for capital expenditure. So that is what the idea is. So fiscal deficit basically gives the idea of total borrowing requirements of the government. So fiscal deficit is targeted to be kept at 3% of GDP. That was under FRBM Act 2013. Fresh targets have not been set yet. For 2016-17, that particular year, the target was 3.5%, which has been achieved. And for the next financial year, the budget has said that it will be kept at 3.2%. So this fiscal deficit timeline will also be tried to be maintained. Reduction here is also on agenda. Even though capital expenditure allocation has increased, this has also been assured. So this is also appreciated. Then it talks of buoyancy of tax revenues, that it says that this will be possible because of buoyancy of tax revenues, both direct and indirect taxes. So they are increasing. Custom duty has not been high, but excise duty and personal and corporate taxes have contributed significantly to the government. So they will be able to keep fiscal deficit under control. Also, international oil prices are low. So that is also an added advantage. Then next is spoken of regarding tax to GDP ratio. So tax to GDP ratio is how much percentage of taxation is paid as compared to the total GDP. So this has also increased, which is good, means more taxation collection is taking place. So it has risen to 11.3% of GDP. So it was estimated to be 10.8%, but it has increased. This is the first time since 2007-8 that the tax to GDP ratio has crossed the 11% mark. Earlier it was stagnating at 10% since 2008-9 global financial crisis. So this is also good. Expenditure to GDP ratio has declined over the years. So that is also a good thing. The expenditure decline is there. So these are some of the provisions discussed. Plus then regarding meeting the revenue targets. So this is fiscal deficit and revenue deficit which are projected. So fiscal deficit will decline to 3.2% as we just said for this financial year 2017-18. Revenue deficit is still to be reduced. So this will reduce to 1.9%. So earlier targets were 3 and 1.8. So they have increased a little, but then as it is said that the budget is making allocations for all. So this minute increase in the deficit targets are also acceptable. So this is fiscal deficit, revenue deficit target for the coming financial year. Then it is said that there could be an greater effort to trim the revenue deficit. As we just discussed, the revenue deficit is borrowing to consume. So that has to be reduced. It has to be eliminated actually. Then income tax and corporate tax, this we have discussed already. So personal income tax have been lowest slab is 5%. Uniform rebate would be provided to higher tax slabs. So 12,500 uniform rebate is also provided on taxes. Surcharge we already discussed, 10% surcharge is proposed in this slab, 50 lakh to 1 crore. And this 15% surcharge which is there for above rupees 1 crore slab, this will continue. There is no reduction in the corporate tax rate. It is 30% only for small and medium enterprises of annual turnover up to rupees 50 crore would have a lower corporate tax rate of 25%. Even minimum alternate tax will continue. So this has only one modification made, that is the carry forward limit for MAT credit is 15 years now. Earlier it was 10 years. So minimum alternate tax is a tax which is a corporate tax because many companies, they do not show book profits. So although they are functioning and earning well, but the profits shown as such are not there. So there are allocations done, new investments done, whatever. So they don't show book profits. So in those cases, the minimum alternate tax is demanded. So this is called MAT. That though you don't have book profit, but you still have to pay a tax. So around 18.5% MAT is demanded from these companies. So that is the minimum alternate tax. Then next is regarding UIB and subsidies. So UIB, Universal Basic Income, which has been discussed in the economic survey, has not been mentioned in the budget. So subsidies allocation has been provided for. Subsidies allocation has been up to 1.6% of the GDP. So this subsidy allocation has been done. So that is a good thing. Even food and fertilizer subsidies alone are a huge chunk. So they constitute around 1.6% of the GDP overall. So that is also good. Then MGNREGA. Here also allocation has increased by over 25%. So this is the maximum allocation done to this scheme so far. So that is also appreciated. So then rural orientation in the budget. So this, what incentives have been provided for our open defecation free villages will be supplied arsenic and fluoride free piped waters. So this incentive scheme has been proposed. Then a special fund for irrigation will be created and operated by NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. So this is irrigation fund. Great. Then agriculture, it has said it will continue to grow by 4.1% growth rate. So that how will it be achieved has not been mentioned, but even this target is appreciated. Then there's a plan to lift 50,000 gram panchayats out of poverty. Again, how will these gram panchayats be chosen and what is the plan has not been put forth, but this proposal has also been given in the budget. Then with respect to the growth rate, so it says for India to grow at 8% in the next decade, exports have to grow by 15%, at least by up to 15%. So here there is a problem because exports are facing a problem because of the global economy facing trouble. So US is turning against globalization. So that will affect India. So that is why the growth rate which can be projected will suffer as well. So as we saw yesterday in the economic survey too, the growth rate forecast had these conditions apply attached regarding the external economies also, especially USA. So that is there. So that is why it says that rather than depending on external sector, we should focus more on internal sources of growth. So that will help in growth rate increasing. It says there is not much fiscal space to increase public investment, government investment. So private investment has to pick up. So this has to be led by corporates, and that because they are under debt, there are troubles for them. So even looking into the debts and non-performing assets of banks will, when these write-offs would take place, these will also spur the banks and would result in the economy picking up again. But the budget as such is not talking of those aspects. These were covered in the economic survey. So that is it. Thank you.